Good morning, everybody. Yesterday, the budget committees of both houses reviewed the framework that will lay the foundation of the budget that will be taken up by both houses this Friday. This budget not only closes the deficit this year, it erases the $20 billion structural deficit California was facing just 18 months ago. And it turns that deficit into a $2 billion reserve by fiscal year 2015-2016. This budget protects and invests in public education this year and increases Prop 98 funding by $17 billion over the next 4 years. We make the tough choices necessary to eliminate the structural deficit, and we end the year with reserves of approximately $550 million. But let's be clear about one thing. Both the proposals put forward by the governor and by the legislature reflect the core issue driving our continued budget instability. Cuts alone will not solve this problem. New revenues are essential to stabilizing our budget and bringing it into long-term balance. I strongly believe that the differences between the governor's proposal and our proposal are bridgeable. Frankly, we're not only on the same page as the governor, we're in the same paragraph. It's time California's chronic budget problems come to an end. Every Democratic member of the Senate and Assembly is committed to accomplishing that important goal, and we'll move forward with a budget proposal that does exactly that this Friday. Now I'd like to turn the podium over to my colleague, Senate President Pro Tem Darrell Steinberg.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I concur, of course, in all of your comments, and let me add a few before we take questions. As the Speaker said, the Senate and the Assembly will take a balanced budget to our respective floors on Friday. It will be a budget that is balanced in year one, balanced in year two, balanced in year three, and with a $2 billion surplus in year four. Our budget will include significant ongoing cuts in all areas of health and human services. Relative to the governor's May revision, it contains no additional borrowing or so-called gimmicks. In fact, our budget will reduce general fund borrowing in the budget year relative to the governor's May revision. Neither the Speaker nor I nor our colleagues are looking for a fight with the governor. We are all invested in his success and the state's success, and we still can find common ground. But we will not shy from a fight if it is necessary to stand for the middle class, the poor, and the struggling Californians who have already taken a huge burden of past budget decisions. Just today, the Los Angeles Times published a lead editorial in which it described what we are dealing with when it comes to the so-called CalWORKs program that the governor mentioned in his statement yesterday. And I want to quote from part of this. The Los Angeles Times talks about how general relief was holding relatively steady at just over 60,000 people a year in the early part of the last decade. And then unemployment dropped in 2005 and 6, and so did the number of people who needed relief. Then beginning in 07-08, thousands of people lost jobs as the economy collapsed. Unemployment more than doubled to 12.58%. The number of CalWORKs cases similarly increased from about 58,000 to about 106,000. It's entirely logical that CalWORKs claims, the LA Times writes, rise when people are losing their jobs. And as you know, from 2009 to the present, we have made cumulatively about $4 billion worth of cuts in this crucial area that is deemed by many to be the best assistance to work program in the country. Members of the public, this can be the beginning, this budget season and the next several days can be the beginning of creating real momentum for November. an on-time balanced budget, pension reform, foreclosure relief, infrastructure investments, and more. There are plenty of people out there, no doubt, who are hoping that between the legislature and the governor that we divide and we fail. Success breeds success. We want to work together. We want to get this done on fair terms, and we intend to do so. Happy to take your questions.
Can I ask about the ongoing divisions over welfare? What's your sense of where the governor is? Is it a deeply held policy belief that we need these structural changes to welfare, or is it somehow connected, I think, to perhaps the tax initiative that broad support?
I think the governor and we want to make sure that we create an environment where everybody is motivated to find work, and quite frankly, where we have the opportunity for everybody to find work. And so what's really motivating him and what's motivating us is to create the circumstances whereby which we can grow jobs in California. When you look at the editorial from your newspaper today that the pro tem references, there's that very direct linkage to recovering our economy, building jobs, and moving people off dependency, and that's where our common grind lies.
How concerned are you? You said that you'd be willing to battle the governor if you needed to protect some of these cuts. How concerned are you about the optics of that going into the November election, that you're willing to have a fight with the governor over welfare?
Let me say, you missed, Michael, the first part of what I said, which is we are not looking for a fight, and I've said that repeatedly. On the other hand, we have an obligation, not to over-dramatize this, but it's true, we have an obligation to be a voice for the voiceless. And there are effective advocates here on behalf of a lot of what we stand for, but there really are no powerful voices. And it is our obligation to make sure that while we cut out of necessity, which we've demonstrated time and time again we are willing to do and willing to do again, that we don't cut just to make a point. And because these are numbers. These numbers translate into impacts on real lives. And it's those real lives that we feel an obligation, and our colleagues feel an obligation to stand to stand for and to stand
Can you, speaking of what you've just had in your hand, can you give us at some point a very detailed list of where your budget differs from the governor? And to that point,
15 minutes.
Excellent. Is it a $1 billion difference? Is it a $2 billion difference that you had to come up with ideas? Both numbers have floated around. So.
There are a lot of numbers that have floated around, and we'll get you a full briefing. And the question is really not about where the difference is. It's where the common ground is, because that's what motivates all of these discussions. How to find a budget solution that achieves all the goals that we've talked about. Clearly, first and foremost, is creating a balanced budget for the year and creating structural balance into the future. Making sure that we end this year-over-year problem of structural instability. So this budget builds on the success of last year's budget, where we significantly reduced the structural deficit of the state of California. Now, you asked about a fight. That presumes that we don't get to resolution. And I don't think that that's a fair assumption at all. Quite frankly, the pro tem's approach, my approach, the approach of members of both houses of the legislature have been to find common ground. Now, in a democratic system, in a system with separation of powers, there is naturally a place for tension between the views of the legislature and the views of the executive branch. And that's all you're seeing play out. But what you really see is common ground in what it is that the governor's trying to get done and what it is that we're trying to get done. Yesterday's work product from both houses' budget committees shows the movement in that direction. There's more work that's going to be done. The governor referenced the fact that there's a chance to find even greater solutions together. We're committed to finding those solutions and not dragging this on into a protracted.
If I might, he also referenced that the budget document you're looking at is not structurally balanced.
Well, no, he referenced what he had been looking at when he made the statement.
We are.
And in the moment,
so you're saying he was looking at something that's not what you're at?
Correct.
There's no way he could have looked at the document that we're looking at and made that statement.
We have been, there's two tracks here, right? There has been a public budget process. There will continue to be. In the meantime, the Speaker and I have been negotiating with the governor. We are prepared now to go to our floor with an updated document that, again, an updated budget that meets all of his criteria. Balance in the budget year, balance in the interim years, and surplus in the final year. And by the way, just an interesting fact. When you really look at this, the question comes down, in one way, you ask, what's the difference? Well, there is the size of the reserve. He has a larger reserve than what we have. Our reserve is $544 million. The governor signed last year's budget with a $543 million reserve. So,
can you talk about where your welfare proposal is, and why does it make sense to continue exempting some parents from work requirements and still giving them cash aid, as opposed to trying to give them, I know it costs more money, but to give them the supports they need to become self-sufficient?
Kevin, it absolutely makes sense to train people for work when work is available. We have 2 million people out of work in the state of California. We don't have 2 million jobs available for them. It is inefficient and, quite frankly, foolish to invest in training for jobs that don't exist. It is much better for us to focus the money to give aid where it's needed and to do the work necessary to create jobs in the state so that jobs will be available for people to take them. Again, going back to the pro tem's statements of just a few minutes ago, as jobs go up, dependency goes down. We don't have a huge number of people who are unwilling to take jobs that are readily available. We have a real unemployment problem in the state and in the country. We've made tremendous work at turning that around. We've grown jobs in the state of California over the last year at a faster rate than other states around the country, but not fast enough to deal with a real crisis of unemployment. So the sooner we get through this, the more of our time leading forward through the end of the legislative cycle can be focused on building on the work that we've already done to grow jobs in the state of California.
So,
you look at the work that we've done in terms of GoBiz. You look at the work that we've done in terms of tax incentives to build green jobs. You look at what we've done to streamline environmental reviews without eliminating the core values of the people of the state of California. That's the essential work that goes hand in hand with our budget work. How do we solve this budget? We solve this budget by making the necessary cuts to bring us into numeric balance. We solve this budget by bringing in revenues that help us grow our way out of this economic morass. And we solve this budget crisis by creating the economic circumstances in the state to grow jobs generally and recover our economy.
When the governor says that the plan that you're working on is unbalanced, your response to that is what?
Our response is that the plan that he is talking about, is structurally balanced in the budget year and has a multi-billion-dollar surplus in 2015-16. It has some peaks and valleys in 13-14 and 14-15. What we have done now over the last 24 hours, and what we are prepared again to show him, of course, but more importantly to take to our floor on Friday, is a budget that has been tweaked a little bit, again, with no borrowing, no one-time gimmicks, to create budget balance in the budget year, $2 billion surplus in the final year, and balance in years 2 and 3. He's asked us to hit 3 targets, and we're prepared to take to our floor and show that we've hit all 3 targets. And so the question of cuts, but when we say that cuts are a necessity, but not a virtue, there is no reason to have to cut deeper to the people who can least afford it. Again, it's not just, let's redefine who the poor are these days, by the way. You're talking about a lot of working people, a lot of middle-class people who are living on the edge. We know that working people, are ending up on the streets, if you look at Los Angeles County and the studies, when we've cut these programs in the past. We don't need to cut deeper when you have structural balance in years 1, 2, 3, and 4.
And a significant reserve in year 4. I think people want to read a lot into 3-paragraph statement that is a snapshot in a moment of negotiations. Now, look, we've all been in this room together many times. And you know, many things get said as folks go on in negotiations. And they're rarely a great reflection of where you end up getting final resolution. I have one quote that I always say. Other people have their go-to positions. So for some people, their go-to position is saying not balanced. For me, it's all options are on the table.
So how many more meetings do you have?
Gentlemen, is that the governor is saying, he's drawing a line in the sand. He says he wants welfare reform. He wants a structural reform. What can you do? You have to give him something.
We will get to a balanced budget that balances the year, that balances each of the next several years, that builds us to a structural reserve. And when we take that action, I think you'll see commensurate action from the governor.
You have this plan that you're willing to take to the floor. Are you open to changes to that plan before it hits the floor?
I refer you to my last answer.
All
options are on the table.
I'll say, look, this is parallel. Yes, we are continuing to talk and negotiate with the governor. But we've laid out, the thing that feels good, if you will, none of this feels too good, but is the fact that we are standing for what we have always stood for and with who we have always stood. I mean, again, I go back to how we see our jobs. It's, of course, to balance the budget. And Lord knows we've made dent after dent after dent after dent disproportionately on the cut side. And we're doing it again this year, but we also have that obligation to stand with the working people and the people who are struggling to make sure that we don't make their lives any more difficult.
Let me give my answer in a slightly different way. And this,
we're different?
Yes. This highlights how you can read into any little statement and say, oh my God, there's a difference. The speaker and the pro tem had a different statement in reaction to this question. And the way I'd say the same point that the pro tem did is, yes, we have an obligation to find solutions in terms of the math, in terms of making sure that the budget balances. But we also have an obligation to make the smartest choices for the long-term well-being of the state of California. Now, what does that mean? That means that some cuts get you efficiency, and some cuts are counterproductive in terms of our long-term economic growth. And so the challenge for us, the challenge for the legislature and the governor together, is to figure out how to balance those two sets of objectives, creating economic balance and creating the best sets of policy to build our way out of the economic morass that we found ourselves in. What we showed last year is we were able to do that effectively and eliminate an overwhelming majority of the structural deficit. This year, we build on that by eliminating the balance of the structural deficit and getting us into fiscal balance year after year, growing our reserves over time, and laying the foundation for the kind of economic recovery and investment that the people of California value.
Steve?
Are you presuming that the governor will accept structural changes in one part of the budget for structural changes in welfare to work?
We believe that we will get to resolution that the governor and we can stand on together.
It would be one thing if we were standing here and saying, Governor, you need to make a choice between protecting the people, the working people of California that we're standing for, or structural balance. You have to make that choice. That's not what we're saying. We are saying that we are going to our floor in a very specific way that, yes, makes cuts in each of these areas, but that does draw a reasonable line and at the same time achieve structural balance in the budget year and in all the out years. It's not, and so when we do that, the question then becomes, why do you need deeper ongoing cuts? Why do you need deeper ongoing cuts if you have structural balance in each of the 4 years? And that's the case we want to make here today. Cuts are a necessity at times. But when you cut unduly or deeper than you have to, you hurt people and you hurt the economy.
Thank you all very much.
What's the latest you can have a deal and still get it out?
Speaker and Darrell, you both said
resolute that you have a vote on Friday?
Yes.
Will that, two questions. One, do you know when that might be in print? And two, do you also?
Tomorrow.
It'll be in print tomorrow.
And do you also anticipate taking up the 3 dozen or so trailer bills on Friday?
We'll take up a good share of them. You know, there's still some issues floating.
What's your message to the unions? The governor's negotiating a 5% cut right now, has reached some agreements.
Work it out. Work it out.
Thank you.
What's the
Work it out.
a deal with the governor? Still bringing up
What?
the
Are
vote.
you prepared for a veto?
We don't want to see a veto. No, we think we can work this out.